Shafiq Bhai, if you can just, that's the end of our Q&A right now. And I would like to invite Trish, and if you could just watch her presentation, and then if you have some time, we will discuss about that with, the four of us could discuss about that. Because to us, this hits, directly at home. So Trish, please start.
All right, just going to do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so today we are going to cover the New Hampshire Resolution 11. So what Farhan Appa and Kausar Pai alluded to earlier, there is a resolution that has recently passed the lower chamber, meaning the New Hampshire House of Representatives recently. And it's specifically about Bangladesh and around allegations of so-called persecution of minorities that are state-sponsored in nature. The resolution also contains some other really serious misinformation, which we will dive into shortly. But before I start this presentation, I just want to make sure that we are all primed on what are the facts that we are working back from, right? So whenever we think about misinformation, it's always good to know, it's always important to know what is the truth, right? And what are the mistruths that we are fighting back against, right? So we're going to start this presentation with three facts. Fact one, the July and August Revolution was a people's revolution. It was not a staged coup, and it was not an Islamic fundamentalist movement. So that's fact one. Fact two, communal violence. In August 2024, there were incidents of violence against minority communities, but we know for a fact that these were primarily politically motivated. And no matter what, whether politically motivated or communal in nature, they are indeed regrettable. However, the fact is that there is or was no genocide of minorities. There was no state sponsored ethnic cleansing and persecution. So, those are core facts. And final fact is the elections of 2024 in January and in 2018 are not considered free nor fair. They're not considered free nor fair by Bangladeshis and also by international monitoring entities, including the U.S. State Department. So when we recognize that these are the core facts, we then can discuss what are the issues we have with NH Res 11. Next slide, please. So the New Hampshire HR 11, what is it? So in the US, the way that policy gets made or the way that state government functions is it's sort of a copy of how things operate at the national, aka the federal level. So at the federal level, you have the US House of Representatives, you have the Senate. At the state level, you have a copy of this. Each state typically has a legislature, and in the legislature, they have a lower chamber known as the House of Representatives, and they have an upper chamber known as the Senate. And typically, when legislation or bills or resolutions get introduced, they get introduced into the lower house, they get voted on. They then go into what we call committee review, which is more of a deep dive into the facts or the information contained within the legislation. Once it goes into committee, it then goes for a vote to the Senate. And that's generally how the process of legislations and resolution works. So in New Hampshire, at the state level, we saw recently in January a bill, and in this case, I'm going to use the words bill and resolution in the same context. A bill was introduced, and the bill was titled urging the United States government to investigate allegations of abuse of minorities, especially Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and other religious minorities by the interim government of Bangladesh. So as you can see, this is starting to already be in conflict with some of the facts that we reviewed earlier, right? Who are the sponsors? The sponsors meaning the people who drafted the resolution, the main person who drafted it, and who are the people who sort of put their weight behind this resolution as it was introduced into the House of Representatives in New Hampshire. So the lead sponsor of this resolution was Bangladeshi origin Representative Abul Khan and his 7 other colleagues. You'll notice here that beside each of these names, I use the word R, which means that they're Republican. Now, that in itself is not an issue. We have seen and we believe that both Republican and Democratic administrations in the US government have historically been very Bangladesh friendly, and we truly appreciate that. So that in itself is not an issue. But what is the issue here is when bills and legislation get introduced, they can either be single party or they can be bipartisan, meaning they're supported by people from both Republican and Democratic parties. So if you can see that there is an R beside the name of each of these sponsors, meaning that it's a uniparty resolution. There is no bipartisan support in terms of the sponsors of this resolution. And where exactly is this resolution? What's the status? So, as we said, the resolution passed the lower chamber, meaning the House of Representatives. It passed on February 13th. It is currently under committee review. The committee that is reviewing this resolution is called the Federal Relations and Veteran Affairs Committee. And they're going to be doing this until March 20th, after which it will be sent to the New Hampshire Senate to be voted on. Once voted on, we'll talk about what happens. But the key takeaway here is that we still have time to make our voices heard about our issues and our concerns with this resolution. The time is now, the time is there, and we must act. Our citizen advocacy is going to be very important. And this is what we will cover in more detail. So next slide, please. So what exactly does the bill contain? Why do we have issues with it, right? So here are some snapshots that we've pulled from the bill. So first issue, if you look over here, it says that whereas the election of January 7th, 2024 caused the peaceful country of Bangladesh to elect a peaceful government. So that is in conflict with one of the facts that we reviewed earlier. Second issue, whereas that government was overthrown by a so-called student uprising supported by Islamic fundamentalists that is hostile to religious minorities. That is again in conflict with a core fact that we reviewed earlier. Whereas Mohammed Yunus, the current leader of Bangladesh, has attempted to erase the history of Bangabandhu by canceling national holidays such as the Father of the Nation's birthday and removing plaques and renaming institutions that were placed or named in his honor. So again, one, not only is that in conflict with fact, but it is also very troubling that a country, the US, will have such a problem with a sovereign nation deciding to hold what national holiday it wants to, deciding to rename or name its national institutions and its plaques the way it wants to. And then on top of that, we know that a lot of these renamings of institutions were done so that we could name them after July martyrs. What's so problematic about that, right? So again, this in itself is not only problematic, but it's also in conflict with facts. And then finally, another snapshot is whereas there have been extrajudicial killings of citizens who have either spoken out against Yunus government or who are members of the previous government, including members of Awami League and including the killing of police officers, etc. Right? Again, this sort of comes into conflict with some of the facts that we reviewed earlier. The narrative that this clause tells you is that there's some sort of state-sponsored behavior in nature that is against the police force, that is against the citizens of Bangladesh, and that is sanctioned by the Yunus government. And again, this is not factual, right? So now that we know what are some of the contents that is really problematic about this bill, let's do a further deep dive. Next slide, please. So what exactly happens when this bill, if this bill passes the New Hampshire Senate, right? So it's going to be sent to the Senate for a vote, probably around March 20th. Some of us are looking out for when exactly the vote is going to be scheduled, and we will communicate that. But if it passes the New Hampshire Senate, it asks for a copy of this resolution to be sent to members of the New Hampshire congressional delegation. And so those are basically people who represent New Hampshire at the federal level. So that includes Democratic Senator Jean Shaheen, who is currently, by the way, the most senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Previously held by Dick Durbin, who is a wonderful friend of Bangladesh. It also includes Maggie Hassan, Chris Pappas, who's a representative, and Maggie Goodlander, who's a representative. A copy will be sent to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to President Donald J. Trump, and to the White House press office, right? So basically, it's asking for these concerns, if voted favorably by the Senate, to then be continued and sent to all these sort of at the federal level for further investigation, right? Next slide, please. So zooming in, we talked about how the lead sponsor of the bill is New Hampshire State Representative Abul Khan. What do we know about him? And again, the Bangladesh US alliance is very focused on facts. We're not interested in sharing any allegations. We're just going communicating the facts here. And so, what do we know about Abu Khan based on publicly available information? He's been elected 4 times as a New Hampshire representative for the district of Seabrook and Hampton Falls, which has a population of about 10,000 people. He is up for re-election in 2026. He was born in Bhandaria Upazila of Pirojpur district. He was enrolled for a period of time in Dhaka University, but we're not able to verify his graduation date. Next slide, please. Here's some information about Abu Khan. So the first 2 pictures on the very far left, actually we'll start with the first picture on the very far right. On the far right, you're seeing a picture of a group of people holding 3 flags, the Awami League flag, the Bangladesh flag, and the US flag. And these are people who are holding up these pictures on the day that HR 11 passed the New Hampshire House of Representatives. The day that it passed the House, these flags were being held up by these Bangladeshis. On the left side, you're seeing the same subset of those people. So about 3 to 4 people who are on the picture on the right are also on the picture of the left. These are the people appearing with Representative Abu Khan on New Hampshire local television WMUR 9 after it was passed. Let's look at the picture on the bottom left. Here's a picture of Representative Abu Khan earlier this month, appearing with co-sponsor of HR 11, Doug Thomas, where he's talking about the repeal of UN peacekeeping troops from Bangladesh based on allegations of minority persecution, right? And on the very far bottom right, here's another picture of Representative Abu Khan at a cultural event some time ago with the same subset of the people who are holding up the Awami League flag in the picture of the top. We're not able to verify the date of this picture, but certain things are starting to become clear. Abu Khan has friends in the Awami League, right? And we're not making allegations here. We're simply sharing with you publicly available information. And this sort of gives you a little bit of a picture on where maybe Representative Abu Khan stands on certain topics, especially with respect to Bangladesh Awami League. Next slide, please. So, what is the fallout of something like this passing in the New Hampshire House of Representatives and potentially passing in the Senate? We'll talk about a few fallouts and one implication. Fallout 1, reputational damage and negative media coverage. So, as soon as HR 11 was passed, WMUR 9, which is a local television channel in New Hampshire, picked it up. And if you can see from the first picture, they had a video where Rep Abu Khan is talking and he's saying, hey, US taxpayers send money to Bangladesh. We're really concerned about these allegations of religious minorities. So Bangladesh should be investigated, right? Now, the thing is, when a local news channel picks these up, these are typically then rebroadcasted by their holding companies. So in the case of WMUR, it is owned by ABC, which is a national broadcaster. So anything that's covered locally is then rebroadcasted nationally. And then these are then picked up by news aggregators like Yahoo News. So you can see from these pictures, you have WMUR, a local channel, publishing this news, and then that gets repropagated by ABC and by news aggregators like Yahoo News. So the key call out here is that what starts locally is then disseminated globally across millions of viewers, right? And obviously, as Shofikai mentioned earlier, we already have seen media outlets from India cover these at length. Example, the Economic Times with the headline, New Hampshire House urges Donald Trump to act against Dhaka over rights, right? So there's a lot of narrative spinning that we're seeing here. So that's Fallout 1. Fallout 2, next slide, please. Next slide is, it sets a precedence for US policies. And what do we mean by that? When you have a vacuum in the Bangladesh government's engagement with US policymakers, it allows narratives from the Bangladesh US Awami League and allied US based lobbyists to bridge the gap with misinformation. So, what are some examples? On the very left picture, you're seeing a picture of Rep. Raja Krishnamurthy, who on January 7th this year went at the US House of Representatives, and he made claims that the 1971 war was a genocide of primarily Hindus, and that, quote unquote genocide has continued on this day. And he's urging the US government, the US House of Representatives and Senate to investigate the government of Bangladesh for its genocide and persecution of Hindus, right? In the second example, you're seeing Representative Sri Thanedar, who's a Democrat from Michigan, going on the House floor in December, so a few months ago, where he's talking about how Chinmoy Dash was a priest that was arrested and his lawyer was murdered by members of the UNA's government, right? And he's also saying that this is an example of minority persecution and that it's the time for the US to use levers such as humanitarian aid and economic sanctions in order to bring these atrocities to justice. And then finally, on the far right, you're seeing Neeraj Antani, who is a Ohio State representative, a former Ohio State representative, who went on the Ohio House floor and said something similar, that as Bangladesh chaos deepens, attacks on Hindu mandirs, threats on Hindus and Christians continue. And we must recognize that this horror is continuing, right? So it's already starting to bubble up in terms of how politicians communicate about Bangladesh at the federal level and at the state level. Next slide. Fallout 3. And so once you have these narratives that are being set by politicians, right, and communicated in state and federal houses, state and federal chambers, it starts providing validity to other misinformation campaigns in the US. So here's an example of a set of billboards that have been set up outside San Francisco Airport. It's called the hashtag Ask Yunus Why campaign. And as you can see, it alternates between pictures of Hindu monks arrested in Bangladesh with a picture of Chinmoy Dash, and then another slogan that says Hindus, Buddhists, Christians living in fear in Bangladesh, askyunuswhy.com. This specific campaign is currently running in San Francisco, and it's been co-sponsored by the United Hindu Council and Hindu American Foundation. Next slide, please. So implication. The reason why we bring this topic up is because not only is there time left to act in New Hampshire, but we also want to give you the tools to identify patterns that may happen in other state levels. From our research, we have reason to believe that the next state where this might happen is Michigan. This is primarily speculation, but it's based on specific insights that we've uncovered. We know that Michigan has a sizable Bangladeshi population. We know that Michigan has influential Awami League affiliated figures, such as Mohammed Rabbi Alam, who are also connected with local Michigan politicians. For instance, Rabbi Alam ran for Michigan for Michigan Senate in 2022, and he's also currently president of the Bangabandhu Commission of the US. And then finally, we know that Michigan also is where representatives like Sri Thanedar, who was the representative that we talked about earlier, who's calling for sanctions against Bangladesh, he's also from Michigan. And there are allegations of him being sympathetic to BJP, to RSS. And so for a number of reasons, as summarized here, we think Michigan might be next. But again, we're giving you the tools to identify if this is happening at other state levels or if it ever happens at other state levels. Next slide. So what can you do, really? If you are a New Hampshire resident, you have the power to engage at the state and the federal level, email people, call people, follow up, go to hearings, engage and re-engage. Who specifically with? Our recommendations are call, email, contact the New Hampshire state representatives, including the resolution sponsors and the 41 reps that voted against the resolution. Contact the state senators. They're the people who need to know that this resolution coming their way is completely filled with mistruths. Contact the members of the New Hampshire Federal Relations and Veteran Affairs Committee who are reviewing this resolution until March 20th. Contact the New Hampshire Speaker of the House, Sherman Packard. Contact the New Hampshire Republican Party leadership, Jim McKeown and Holly Novoletsky. Abul Khan is from the New Hampshire Republican Party, and the Republican Party should know what one of their representatives has been up to. And contact the New Hampshire Congressional Delegation leadership, Jean Shaheen, Maggie Hassan, Maggie Goodlander, Chris Pappas. So what if you're not a New Hampshire resident? You can still contact all of the people above. From the Bangladeshi American Alliance, we've put together a list of contact emails, and we've put together an email template that you can use, and you can simply copy, paste, and press send. And this will start communicating your concerns to the above people. And then on top of that, not only can you, as an American citizen or as a concerned person, contact these people, you can also add your own US Congress representatives and senators. So the power rests with you to advocate and re-engage and engage these people. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so what are we, the Bangladesh US Alliance, doing? We're sharing this information with the interim government. We're making them know that this is happening in the US, and the interim government should engage with US policymakers to share their concerns about this resolution. We conducted a deep dive today, and we're also conducting outreach in DC and working to engage the Bangladesh consulate to also make our concerns heard. How can we help you? We can provide research and writing support. So if there are specific representatives that you want to email, that you want to communicate your concerns to, and you need tools in order to summarize these things succinctly, we can help you with the research, we can help you with the writing. We can help amplify your voice across our various platforms and across our network. And we can connect you with other networks. Remember, we're all one team, we're all advocates. Be inspired, act now. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. I think
I
we're
believe
having.
this is the last slide.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
Okay.
see.
And so with that, what I'm going to do is I would like to actually hand over the mic for a couple of minutes to Sanid, who is on this call. And he and another person called Muniba have been wonderful people who have been organizing at the grassroots level to communicate and propagate information about this problematic resolution. So first of all, I would really like to thank all the Bangladeshi Americans and Bangladeshis who have already shown their support, that have gotten engaged, and that are working to organize protests and communicate and propagate information about this. And with that, Sanid, I would like to give you a couple of minutes to kind of share some of your thoughts.
Sunny is on his way back to the joining the stream.
Okay.
Give
So
us a minute.
yes, absolutely.
So Shafiq Bhai, like I said, we are just not, doing our work here in X, but actually in reality, we are trying to do things on the ground in the US as and when they happen. And so we have different, friends reaching out and trying to do different things in different states, in different levels. So is she
Professor
back in?
Yunus is a Kausar Bhai. Professor Yunus is a friend of Dick Durbin. Will it help for him to contact Durbin, Senator Durbin?
Absolutely. And if you could help us also to get in touch with him, then our one team would have a team just working with Senator Dick Durbin to try to request help from him in whatever way possible. If you could help us connect, that would be tremendous,
Yes.
because this is the kind of help we need.
Would you mind sending the this slide to me by email? I'm sharing my email address to you. Then I'll send it to Professor Yunus. I think he can
Yes,
set up a
please send
meeting
it.
with Dick Durbin very soon, in a few days, and then he can pass it on to him. Dick Durbin, I have seen how close they are. They're very good old friends. They
Thank
are
you.
friends since the
Yes.
late 1980s.
Amazing. This would be amazing for us. So what I'll do is, Krish, please send us the email. We have sent one to Lamia Morshed. So we are just going to change and put your name there, send it. And also what we'll do is, because at the end of today's show, by tomorrow, we will do a clipping of the presentation that Krish made to you and send that to you as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we continue, can I just put a little bit of a context to Trish's excellent, Trish and team, excellent presentation. For those who are unaware, why are Indian American politicians and these Hindutva groups so invested in the narrative spinning in Bangladesh? And this has been written about many, many times, but in case anyone is unaware, they need to create a narrative called Hinduphobia. because then what that would do, it would give them certain protections under discrimination laws, and they're trying to pursue that, and it also precludes criticism of the current regime in India, and therefore it allows certain kinds of protections. But to create a certain understanding of Hindus being under attack, when the Sheikh Hasina regime fell, they immediately jumped on it. On August 5th, she flew away. Right away, a campaign against Bangladesh started, and it always included this Hindu genocide while not much was happening, because it's a particular investment of Indian regime and their global geopolitics, and has very little to do with Bangladesh. But in the process, they're harming Bangladesh and the former regime. Those who are aligning with that should at least recognize the harm they're doing to their country that they proclaim to care about. But by aligning with a group of people who are doing it for their own vested interests, they're not realizing the harm they're doing in spreading these lies. The whole narrative of Hindu genocide is to help bolster a mythical Hinduphobia, which actually doesn't exist. There's 1.2 billion Hindus, and there is not systematic persecution against Hindus globally. So this is the background context in which you're seeing those billboards and these particular politicians take the floor. It's also very well-funded campaign, and there's a lot of writing and research that exists on this for anyone who's interested to know, why is Bangladesh suddenly in the spotlight when it wasn't the day before August 5th, right? So if it's a process, why was this never raised before, but now? So there's clearly wider vested politics going on. So this is why what the Trish and the team put together is an example of the kind of outcomes they're seeking in US domestic politics. So the US can therefore influence. So I think Dr. Yunus, speaking with Dick Durbin, but also with other politicians, to head this off and put it in this wider context. This is entirely about another foreign regime interfering in our domestic politics and spinning a certain narrative for its own purposes. And I'll hand it over to Sanid.
Hi, thank you, Trish. Very excellent presentation I saw so far. And I want to wish the best to our new political party, NCP. I got a role along with Mr. Shafiq Alam. I'm also a well-wisher. So I'm going to the exact point right now. The thing like Mr. Abul Khan, what did, that's a very traitor thing he can do for Bangladesh. Like I want to bring a example. If we forget that the thing that the Priya Shaha from Hindu Buddhist Christian Unity Commission back in 2019, she complained to Mr. Donald J. Trump about minorities being attacked, while we all, though we wasn't, Awami League, those fascist Awami League, ally, but still we say, no, this is not right. So you can't do that to our nation. So that's the same thing did Mr. Abul B. Khan, that he want to bring an lie to the United States government that those interim government are doing something bad. We should put some sanctions, or we should talk against them, so they get scared. So I think this is the thing, we have to fight that combat together, though from the interim government and also from whoever friends or families are in the US or in the global arena. So we have to fight them together. I guess Trish showed us some good point, like how we can really fight them. And another thing, like Mr. Abul B. Khan, I wasn't surprised whenever I see that this kind of resolution goes to the House, because he's a four-time elected member. So he's elected member, but he's a good ally of Awami League, and he did it, and some people from the Awami League was behind it. So I want to, say that you guys did a very terrible thing for our country. Mr. Abul B. Khan, we are after you now. Though I don't live in the New Hampshire, but I live in Massachusetts, not very far from it. And next time, whenever you are for elections, we will be after you. The second thing I want to say, if you want to, be a really good friend of Bangladesh, what you can do? The interim government is asking, all those money back, which has been illegally laundered from Bangladesh, and he want to, get all those money back. You can request your government, to comply with the interim government to get those money back. But he never was up for it, because he knows his party, Fascist Awami League, was behind all those money laundering, stealing all those money from Bangladesh. But he was never for any betterment of Bangladesh, but he was betterment for those fascist Awami League and fascist Hasina. He was up for them. So I want to say, Mr. Abul B. Khan, whatever you did for our community, for whatever you did for our, for the reputation of Bangladesh, maybe you put a scratch, but we are after you now. And I know that from very well wisher of Bangladesh, we're gonna fight that back. Thank you so much, everyone.
Fantastic work, Sunny. Just to kind of amplify the things that Sunny said, you have a politician who is in a position of influence and position of power, and who had the ability to operate in a way that serves Bangladeshis, that serves New Hampshireites, and that serves Americans. And you did not see that in Abul Khan's actions through this resolution. And that is something for all of us to take away. These people do not serve their constituents in America. They do not serve their kin in Bangladesh. And that is problematic. And with that, we will close the chapter on NHRES. Please reach out to us if you would like to learn more, if you want access to the email templates, to the list of contacts we've compiled, if you want to get in touch with the broader network of people that we've created in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, reach out to us. We will empower you. Thanks, everyone.